It seems impossible that a 13th century Sufi mystic would have anything in common with a 16th century architect of ruthless political power. Yet, if you read the Persian poet Rumi, you will find an allegory about a lion and a fox, alongside cynical observations that the material world is essentially a battlefield of deceit. Read Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince, specifically chapter 18, and you find the exact same animal metaphor. A ruler, he writes, must know how to imitate both the fox and the lion. Because of these linguistic overlaps, a persistent analytical trap has formed. Readers see Rumi discussing policy or practical intellect, and they label his worldly observations as Machiavellian. But relying on isolated quotes and surface-level similarities creates a massive category error in comparative philosophy. To determine if Rumi actually shares Machiavelli's political worldview, we have to subject the text to a much stricter test. We have to discard loose definitions of the word Machiavellian and anchor our baseline in the actual axioms published in his original texts. This matrix maps Machiavelli's 6 core pillars. It begins with political realism and distrust of human nature. It's completed by supremacy of power over virtue, the utility of fear, deceptive appearances, and virtù, manipulating fate. This consensus stems from scholars like Skinner, Berlin, and Strauss. Any legitimate claim that Rumi holds a Machiavellian worldview must map directly against this specific 6-point architecture. The first phase of our test looks for descriptive realism. This is the cold observation of how humans behave in reality, completely separate from how they ought to behave. Isolating the second and fifth pillars of the matrix, distrust of human nature, reveals where both thinkers overlap. Machiavelli diagnosed the public as fickle and driven by self-interest. In the Masnavi, Rumi writes, "When self-interest appears, virtue is hidden, identifying the exact same corrupting mechanism." Both men concluded that the vast majority of people are blind followers. Rumi explicitly curses blind imitation among the masses, while Machiavelli observes that the mob is easily swayed by whoever holds power. Neither writer permits any romantic illusions about collective behavior. They look at the masses and see a highly predictable, easily manipulated organism. At this purely diagnostic level, the mystic and the political strategist are examining the exact same flawed blueprint of the human animal. We see a similar overlap in the fourth pillar, the gap between appearance and reality. In The Prince, Machiavelli codifies a strict rule for political life. Everyone sees what you appear to be, but few touch what you truly are. Rumi delivers an identical warning. He argues a person's outer form is merely bone and hair, and that judging reality by outward appearances is a fatal error. In a world saturated with deceit, Rumi insists that a sharp intellect must learn to read hidden signs and avoid falling for the mere appearance of virtue. The political philosopher Leo Strauss identified this specific ability to discern the gap between optics and truth as one of Machiavelli's most critical teachings. Both masters perfectly align on how an educated mind must perceive the world's deception, and this shared epistemology is precisely the trap that catches lazy comparativists. But a shared diagnosis does not equal a shared prescription. To understand where they break apart, we have to look at their teleology, the ultimate end state their philosophies are trying to achieve. Both start at this exact origin point of zero, the descriptive reality that humans are flawed. From that starting line, Machiavelli's prescriptive vector shoots sharply upward. Because humans are inherently bad, he argues, the prince must learn how not to be good. For Machiavelli, the sole metric of success is the state's physical survival. If deceit and violence secure that stability, they are completely justified. Now watch Rumi's prescriptive vector from that exact same origin point. Rumi observes that humans are trapped by base desires, but his solution is to completely transcend them. The ultimate goal is not to exploit human weakness for worldly gain, but to escape it entirely. This brings us to a frequently misunderstood verse in the Masnavi, where Rumi advises the reader to trade shrewdness for bewilderment. Far from aligning with Machiavelli, that line is a direct attack on the sixth pillar of Machiavellian thought, virtù, or instrumental rationality. Rumi is actively telling you to abandon calculated political advantage in favor of mystical unity. Machiavelli weaponizes human flaws to build a state. Rumi identifies those same flaws to dismantle the ego. Their teleological vectors move in diametrically opposite directions. When we step back and evaluate the massive volume of the Masnavi as a complete text, the data is unambiguous. Out of tens of thousands of lines, perhaps 10 to 15 verses accurately align with Machiavelli's descriptive realism, and out of those same tens of thousands of lines, absolutely zero advocate for the core Machiavellian thesis. Rumi never once prioritizes power over moral virtue. The intellectual historian Isaiah Berlin provided the definitive framework for understanding this divide. Berlin demonstrated that Machiavelli's true originality was inventing a totally independent system of political ethics. Rumi, as a mystic, operates in an entirely different ethical universe. Other scholars like Harvey Mansfield and Maurizio Viroli reinforce this. True Machiavellianism requires the active, prescriptive use of deceit for statecraft. That mechanism is wholly absent in Rumi. Conflating Rumi's pragmatic warnings about worldly deception with a Renaissance political handbook confuses the map for the destination. For Rumi, recognizing human cruelty is just a stepping stone towards transcendence. It is a reason to look upward, not a manual for tyranny.